And good evening. Welcome to the Dixie Vodka SEC Country Preview Show. I'm your host, Matt Stewart, joined by our Florida State National Championship offensive lineman, Forrest Conley. Thanks again for joining us. Coming up in the next 60 minutes, we've got a jam-packed show. We are less than 48 hours away from the world's largest cocktail party, although they don't want us to call it that anymore. But hey, you know what it is. If you're down there, you know you're right in the middle of it. Got a strange week, lots of trash talk going on. We've got allegations of death threats. It's been crazy. We're going to preview the game with one of the Gators' all-time greats, defensive end Kevin Carter is going to join us to talk about that game. Also, we got issues for Tennessee this week. Doesn't it seem like the whole season's been an issue? Issues for Tennessee this week as they get ready to play Kentucky. We'll preview that game. And we're going to look at a big Western Division matchup against Mississippi State and Texas A&M. Bulldogs look great at home. Guess what? They're not at home this week. They're in College Station. So we'll see what happens. So we'll be talking about all those games. Plus, we'll be previewing all the other big matchups in the SEC as well, reading your post and making our predictions for the week as well. All right, let's get started with the opening kickoff, and that's where we take a look at the big news around the conference and the breaking news, if you will, breaking in that it kind of came across the wire about a couple of hours ago. 7 suspended Florida Gators. You know about all those guys, including Antonio Callaway and Jordan Scarlett, are going to enter into a pretrial intervention. And what all this means is at the end of all this, it looks like they could have their felony credit card fraud charges dropped. What they'll have to do is make restitution, go through probation, and then those charges could be dropped from their record. My question to you, Forrest, I think this is a good thing. Anytime a kid gets another chance, they can make restitution, make good for the boneheaded thing that they did. My question to you, though, is will we ever see any of these 7 Gators in a Gator uniform again?
Very interesting question. I think with guys that are underclassmen, you may see those guys, but I think they'll have to do something extra along with the restitution process, because for the program, this is a big embarrassment. It not only affected the program, it affected the season. It affects recruiting. So these are the little things and the little intangibles that a lot of people are not talking about. It affects recruiting. You've got a program that's under duress right now. You've got 9 players that are not playing. Not 1, not 2, not 5, 9. You've almost got a starting lineup. So when you look at the amount of players and the players that were affected, these are star players. Yeah. These aren't backups. Yeah. So I think with the season, the way it's gone, there's a possibility, but I do think these guys will have to do a little bit extra to go along with the restitution process. My question to you, Matt, is do they get a red shirt for this year?
I tried to look that up amongst NCAA regulations through the rule book. Couldn't really find it right away. It would seem like technically they would be able to, but I'm not sure about that. I didn't see anything that was immediately addressed about suspended players being able to get a red shirt. We certainly will be following this story in the days and weeks, maybe even months ahead with the Florida Gators. All right, the other strange story is the allegations of the death threats that first came out when Jim McElwain held his news conference on Monday, starting the week, and now he's backed off those things. What was really strange about this is after he talked about these death threats and did not elaborate them in the news conference, the media reporters, they go to the administration and they're like, we don't know anything about it. So some really strange stuff going on here, and apparently it seems like there really wasn't any death threats, not immediately, towards McElwain, his coaches, or players. They're all just kind of a generic kind of thing, anonymous. What do you make of this whole story?
Well, let me put this disclaimer out there first of all. I don't know Coach Mack personally, but he's a different type of guy. When you watch him in his post-game interviews, he's very aloof. When they win the ball game, you don't know if you haven't watched the game whether they've won or not. Some of the things that he said, it's just kind of been off-brand. And when I hear this comment and see what he's saying, and you look at the outcome so far from what we know, I just think it's Coach Mack being Coach Mack. He's just an aloof type guy. And you have to wonder, does he really want to be there when you come out with statements and comments like this, and then the response that he gives the media when they question him about it?
Yeah, and I think the real puzzling thing was the way the administration kind of backed away from it and said, look, we don't know anything about it. You would think they would at least say, hey, we're looking into it. But they made it clear that they had nothing to do about it, didn't know anything about it. So I think that it really calls into question the job security and future of Jim McElwain at Florida. Okay, more trouble for Tennessee, as if they needed any more. They're playing at Kentucky this Saturday. It's a team that they have dominated over the years. I mean, historically, we're talking about biblical proportions, the beatdown they've had against the Wildcats. But now they're going to be playing without their star running back, John Kelly. He was suspended from the team after he and linebacker Will Ignat were arrested, or they weren't even arrested. They were just cited for marijuana possession at a traffic violation in Knoxville. They're supposed to turn themselves into authorities on November 7th. Did Butch Jones have any alternative but to suspend these two? And does he get any credit for doing that? Or do the folks there on Rocky Top say, well, yeah, they shouldn't have been hacking out and getting in trouble with the police to begin with. He doesn't have control of the program.
This is an extension of a lack of institutional control. You know, you look back at Darrell Taylor, the player that got suspended because he was fighting in a game. Then the following week at practice, he kicked a teammate in the face. You've got bickering between teammates. You've got temper tantrums being thrown on the field during games by guys because they're not playing. You've got a coach that people don't want around. And you've got a quarterback quandary. This team is just all out of sorts, and this just adds to the miserable season that we've seen so far in Rocky Top.
All right, Nick Saban's making $11 million a year. You're probably not surprised by that, but it kind of came out when the USA Today Sports Coaching Salary Database was released this week. He makes 5 times what the average coach in college football makes, and he's making 2.5 times more than the number 2 guy on the list, Dabo Swinney there at Clemson. There's no doubt he's the best coach in college football right now, maybe the best ever. What makes him so good?
I think his ability to close. When you look at Alabama, they have a 5-star starter that's a sophomore, a true freshman that's a 5-star running back behind that guy, and then they'll go and sign the 2 top running backs in the country to come in and sit and wait. I don't know what they do to sell their program, but I think that is what makes them so special. They just keep churning them out, and they have their choice. A lot of programs will say, okay, we've got our choice of athletes. Alabama really does have their choice of athletes around the country, and I think that is what makes them special, and that's why he's paid $11 million. He's earned it. When you've got a spring game that you can get 102,000 people at the spring game, you've earned the right to make more money than anyone else.
Yeah, I think that he sells the NFL. He sells the NFL. He's got a track record. You come here, you're going to be prepared to play in the NFL. We're going to teach you how to play like you play in the NFL, learn like you learn in the NFL, and I think that's a big selling point for recruits. Before we get to our first quarter and Kevin Carter and a preview of this Gators and Bulldogs game, let's take a look. Here are the top paid coaches in the SEC. This came out from that USA Today Sports Database. And what really stands out as we roll through the list, you see Kevin Sumlin is number 2 on the list. He's number 10 in the country. And then it goes down from there. Malzahn, Mullen, McElwain with a 12.9 buyout. Butch Jones got an 8.1 buyout. And then as we flip the page, the thing that really stands out to me is look at that buyout. The second largest buyout in the conference belongs to Mark Stoops at Kentucky, 14.7.
Well, I think that's, when you look at Mark Stoops, you look at the name, Mark Stoops. You think about Oklahoma. You know Coach Stoops retired this season. I think they know that Mark Stoops is a hot potential hire for bigger programs that are looking to compete for a national champion. And when you look at what Mark Stoops brings to the table, Kentucky wants to make sure if you're going to come and get Mark Stoops, you're going to pay for it. And I understand what they're doing. When you get a guy of a Mark Stoops caliber to come into your program and you're trying to build your program up, a part of that process is making sure that he stays put. And I like the fact that they put that big number out there. That lets him know, and that lets his coaching staff know that they're very into him being there and they like what they see and they want to make sure that he stays there and finishes the job.
All right, let's move on to our first quarter now. Of course, you're watching the Dixie Vodka SEC Country preview show with me, Matt Stewart, and my buddy here, Forrest Conley. Dixie Vodka, the South's best tasting, is available only in the South and made by Southerners for Southerners. As we start with number 3 Georgia playing Florida, 3:30 Eastern game on CBS in Jacksonville. Gators won 3 straight in the series. 21 of the last 26. Our first guest tonight played a big part in the start of that role of dominance by the Gators, that big streak that Florida's been on now for close to 3 decades. He is 14-year NFL vet, college and pro football analyst, and Gator great Kevin Carter, who now joins us on the line. Kevin, how you doing tonight?
You know, I have no real problems. Got plenty that I can complain about, but it doesn't do any good to complain, so I have no real problems.
That's good. Good to hear that you don't have any real problems. Gators have some problems right now, but it seems like whether they have problems or whether they're the favored team, they always seem to beat Georgia on this last Saturday in October, regardless of the circumstances surrounding the programs. Why do you think the Gators have been on this close to 3 decades run of dominance against Georgia and even beat them when they're not the better team?
Well, you know, first and foremost, Coach Spurrier established something really special close to 25, 26 odd years ago when I was there. You know, we established a standard of play, and it wasn't just for our SEC games. It wasn't just for our non-conference games. It wasn't just against FSU. It was against everyone. It was what we did. It was who we were. And if we had the ability to beat you by 30 points, we beat you by 30 points. If we didn't beat you by 30 points and we had the ability to do so, Coach Spurrier himself would have us running stadiums the next morning after the game. He was that much of a perfectionist and a stickler for details. So that's what established our dominance early on, is just him as a coach, instilling that culture, managing other personalities as far as coaches on his staff, and recruiting great talent that Florida's had over the years. But as far as, you know, Georgia winning games or not being able to beat Florida, and even in years where they're supposed to be better on paper, that's sort of like the big brother thing. There's a mental block, I think, that exists sometimes with teams. I mean, everyone has that nemesis, you know, in their life, on their schedule. At some point in their life, you've been on a team where certain teams just had your number. And it doesn't matter what you do, in the back of your mind, you keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. I think that's what Georgia has kind of been going through, because they've had a better team in some recent years, but haven't been able to bring home the victory. Florida has that hold on them, and we'll see if, on paper, things work out for the Bulldogs on Saturday.
Well, Kevin, 50-50 Stadium, this is a vacation of sorts for the fan base, and we know what it's like for the fans. You haven't lost one of these games. What is it like for a player playing in this game right here every year?
This is a mid-season bowl game. This is one of those special events that, you know, coaches can try to prepare you if you've never played in one of these before. They can try to tell you about the electric atmosphere, the excitement, how the stadium is divided, how many people are tailgating around the stadium. And, I mean, they're camped out there like now. There is an RV, like, you know, Indy 500 type pit, Gator, Bulldog tailgating city, if you will, that has all kinds of haunted house things. I mean, there's themes, there's Christmas lights up. I mean, they go all out for this game. And one can tell you about it, but if you've never experienced it, there's no way to prepare you for how exciting that game is. And for us as players, you know, the incentive was we wanted to party after the game. We wanted to enjoy ourselves after we got a win. And the only way that went down is if we won the game. Coach Spurrier would often loosen up the reins, so to speak. Sometimes it worked out if we had we'd have like a bye week after the game. And that was one of our big selling points to the rest of our teammates. Dude, let's get this dub, and Coach is going to let us stay overnight, and we can come back on Sunday. You know, this is what we want to do. And having that attitude, being able to focus on the game, but look forward to, you know, to partying with your buddies and your friends after the game, going out to the landing, enjoying all the festivities and fans that you've seen go on before the game, but not had a chance to participate in because you had a game to play. You know, that was our incentive, and we loved it, and we relished it. And every year we looked forward to that mid-season, you know, late-season October bowl game for us, and it was sort of a measuring stick as well. A lot of times we were on our way to play in an SEC championship game in Atlanta. You know, we were on our way to do that, and this was a crucial, critical step that most times, you know, determined the outcome of the SEC East.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. It really is like a mid-season bowl game, and for fans, it's probably better than a lot of the bowl games that they go to as far as the environment and all that kind of stuff. It's been a strange week. I mean, today the word comes out that those seven of the 9 suspended players, including Antonio Callaway and Jordan Scarlett, are going to go into a pretrial intervention program, and maybe those credit card fraud charges are going to get dropped from their record, which would be a good thing if they can stay on the straight and narrow. I think that. But then you've had the McElwain death threats thing, and it's just been a weird week. What's going on with your alma mater and their program right now?
You know, in my opinion, in a lot of ways, it's a realistic snapshot of where the Gators really are. It's a realistic snapshot in relation to the other teams in the SEC East particularly as well. I mean, the last couple of years, we've been fortunate, we've been lucky, and we've been able to kind of put a Band-Aid on a program and not really fix the problems that really existed. Our offense really didn't improve. You know, defensively was, we were carrying the team, and the defense would have to go out there and shut people down, and the offense would run the ball and do a little bit here and there, and they would somehow get wins. And they kept doing this, and like the last 2 years, they kept finding a way to win. It's a good mark. It's a true mark of a good team, but at the same time, where's the excitement for all the athletes that you have on your roster? Where's the offensive production? There are other schools that seem to be doing more with less. These type questions keep coming up when you're talking about Florida football, and everyone keeps talking about, well, they're still living off of Muschamps recruits on the defense and everything else. Look, this team needs to be rebuilt, and right now they're in the middle of a process. I think it got camouflaged just a little bit for the past 2 seasons because the SEC was so weak, but I think now we're seeing where Florida really is in that rebuilding process. I'm frankly not really surprised. I was waiting for this to happen, mid-season last year or the year before. I was waiting for them to run into some difficulty so they could take a realistic, view at where the program really was.
Well, Kevin, some trash talk from your former team this season. And Steve Spurrier, he let it rip when he was a coach. My feelings are still hurt about the Free Shoes University. I still can't get over that. But
I was a little bit.
Being an esteemed alumni yourself, how do you feel about your team at 3-3 talking trash talk to a team that's undefeated and number 3 in the country?
However you have to motivate yourself, you have to motivate yourself. I've never been one to talk trash, and I've never been one to give the other team bulletin board material. I mean, Georgia doesn't need any incentive to come and beat up on you, in Jacksonville. I mean, that's the atmosphere of that game and the excitement surrounding it, the history, that dictates what's going to happen anyway. I mean, people are going to be excited for this game. Why would you go and run your mouth to a team that has 10 returning starters on defense, has 2 possibly 1,000-yard rushers in Sony Michel and Nick Chubb, and seems to be getting by, even though there's not a receiver on the roster that had over 500 yards receiving last season? This team is getting it done. Jake Fromm is not put in harm's way. The quarterbacks are able to complete passes. Terry Godwin is still doing well. Javon Williams is still doing well. I mean, they've got weapons that they're starting to develop. This offense is getting better and better by the week. And, did I mention that the defense has 10 returning starters, and Kirby Smart has got that thumbprint from Nick Saban, that whole defense, that 3-4-4-3 hybrid defense that Nick Saban runs? This is Kirby Smart's defense that he's installed at Georgia, and they're running it to perfection. They have the personnel, they have the versatility, and they're well coached. So, I don't like that. Frankly, as an old school guy, and maybe it makes me sound even older, but I tell my son all the time, let your play speak for you and shut your mouth.
I'm with you on that, and I think more players, regardless of what team they play for, could use that kind of wisdom there. The Gators quarterback situation remains a huge mystery. It's been a decade now since Tim Tebow, one of the great college quarterbacks, certainly of this era, if not of all time, by the things that he was able to do. It's been a mystery, and this year it's still the same. Felipe Franks is the quarterback now. Del Rio was the quarterback until he got hurt, and just doesn't seem like, even when the Gators bring in 5 stars and they're bringing in another 5-star in next year's class, and Matt Corral, just don't seem to be able to settle in the quarterback situation. What's the mystery behind this quarterback drought in Florida in your mind?
Oftentimes when you take a young person and you try to integrate them into a system in college, particularly at the quarterback position, it comes down to speaking the language of the kid and of the coach. I mean, they have to come together. There's generations between them. They speak different languages. They don't communicate the same. A lot of times these quarterbacks come from these systems, these 7-on-7, systems, pistol systems, and they aren't taught the true old school read progression that typical pro style offenses run. And when you take a quarterback, when you have a quarterback like Felipe Franks that comes from that system, comes from that read option where he's, slinging it and lifting a leg for the snap and throwing it all over the field, and also using his athleticism, you've got to do a good job of tailoring the offense to what the quarterback can do well. And I think that's the issue. That's the breakdown that we're seeing on the field, because as talented as Felipe Franks is, he may have the arm strength to make every throw in the offense. He may have athletic ability to break open runs, but it's just like basketball. When you talk about a player that has excellent shot selection and excellent poise, right now he doesn't have those things. He doesn't know when to fold him, when to hold him, how to go through his progressions, how to find the open receiver. He's always a day late and a dollar short when it comes to making those reads, and that's why the offense really isn't working. I think their offensive line probably is the strength of their offense right now. Brad Davis, the offensive line coach, is a really talented young coach, doing a great job getting them toughened up at the line of scrimmage. I think that's why Malik Davis is having such a great freshman season. But at the same time, at the quarterback position, you can make the quarterback's job easier, but the quarterback has to execute. He is the driver. He is the catalyst. He, in essence, is the keys to the Lamborghini. Without him, it doesn't work. So there's a disconnect between coach and player in terms of getting the player to understand and evolve his collective football IQ forward so he can understand the system you're trying to have him run, but also tailoring the offense, maybe, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but dumb it down a little bit, make it easy, make it quick, make his reads easier for him until he gets the grasp of the system. That's where sometimes coaches' egos and what they want to try and teach someone to do comes into play, and sometimes there has to be a process, and sometimes it just takes patience. So right now, as a fan, I'm being objective and I'm being patient, saying that, hey, give Nussmeier time with this young man, and eventually it'll work out.
Kevin, thanks a lot for being with us and your expertise. We do appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, former Gator great Kevin Carter with us here on the Dixie Vodka SEC Country Preview Show as we move into the second quarter. Remember, it's almost Saturday and you're in the South. That only means two things: Dixie Vodka and SEC football. Dixie Vodka, the South's best tasting vodka. Second quarter, we move along to Tennessee at Kentucky. This is the 7:30 Eastern game on SEC Network. We know that the Vols will be without John Kelly in this game. Can the Vols beat the Wildcats without Kelly in the backfield?
I don't think they would have beat him with Kelly in the backfield. I think this Tennessee ball club is imploding in front of our faces, and it's tough for those kids in Knoxville. They came out with the idea that they were going to compete not only for an Eastern Conference, for an SEC East title, but for an overall title. And now they may not make a bowl game. And I just think that Kentucky is just a better ball club right now. They're better than Tennessee.
Vols have been outscored 101-16 in the last three games, and you've got the off-field issues grabbing headlines. You got Fire Butch Jones all over the place in Tennessee. In fact, even in grocery stores, they're decorating cakes with icing that says Fire Butch Jones. And I'm almost always against firing a head coach in the middle of the season. I think it does no good. What can Tennessee do to keep this season from going totally off the rails, the team not quitting and not winning any more games?
Unfortunately, I don't think they can do anything. I think when you look at this ball club, you've got problems at the quarterback position. You've got problems from the top of the head coach position. You've got problems with your best overall player on offense, Kelly, now being suspended because he was cited for marijuana possession. You look at everything that's going on right now with this Tennessee program. I don't advocate for coaches being fired in the middle of the season as well, Matt, but at the same time, you have to wonder how this affects this team long term, how it affects the young players, how it affects potential players coming to the program. There's a lot that goes into what we see on the field on Saturday, everything that happens during the week. And listen, being a head coach is a very difficult job because you're taking on the responsibility of a father figure to a bunch of young men from around the country. So it's a tough job in itself. And you also got to sell the program to alumni to continue to raise funds and support the program and support the indoor practice facilities and the different things and the different amenities that we see. So it's a very difficult job. But I don't think it's anything that they can do to fix the problem.
The Vols have won 31 of the last 32 meetings between these two teams. That's astounding. The only win for Kentucky since the 80s in this series was in 2011. And usually Tennessee's been the better team. But even when the Vols are not demonstratively better, I'm trying to say, against Kentucky, they still beat them. How do you explain this kind of dominance?
I call this the Jedi mind trick. And I say that it's kind of like you tell somebody Africa is in Asia a bunch of times, they eventually start to believe you. Well, I think it's the same thing for this Vols versus Kentucky ball game. Kentucky goes into these games believing that they're not going to win because they have not won in so long. There have been a few times where Kentucky has had the best player on the field. I think of the Randall Cobb era. Mm-hmm. During that time, he was the best player on the field playing when they played against Tennessee, but one man is not enough. I think Tennessee has always had more talent and more depth, and you see the effects, 31 out of 32. That's how it's going to always go down, but I think it's the Jedi mind trick for Kentucky. They have to believe that they can win this football game. When you believe and you go in believing you can win, then you play a different type of game. And I think for them, they believe this season that they have an opportunity to win this football game.
All right, let's move along to the Vandy at South Carolina game. That's 4 o'clock on SEC Network. Gamecocks are favored in 3 of their last 5 games, including their game against the Commodores on Saturday. If they do that, they win 3 of their last 5, they're going to get to 8-4 on the season. That would be their best record since 2013. They're 5-2 right now. 3 of those 5 wins have come where they were Vegas underdogs. Is Will Muschamp's team the biggest surprise in the SEC?
Absolutely. When you look at the SEC East, everybody thought Florida, Tennessee, Georgia, not in that order, but those were the 3 top teams. You've got a South Carolina ball club that's competing for a second place finish in the conference. I don't think they can win it. I think they can compete for a second place finish. And one thing that people overlook is that first win of the season. They beat an NC State ball club that I don't think anybody wants to play right now, and people realize how good NC State really is. Mm-hmm. They beat that ball club, and to me, that's their signature win so far this season.
Yeah, they're talking about NC State possibly working themselves into a spot in the national playoff if they continue to win ball games.
Absolutely. Well, they run the ball effectively with 2 different backs. And to win in today's era of football, it's not the spread offense. It's being able to dot the I and run right down somebody's throat. And I like what NC State brings to the table. So I think for South Carolina, they are by far the biggest surprise. And I'm really impressed with Will Muschamp and what he's done with that program.
Well, I'll tell you what, and South Carolina still has a mathematical shot at winning the SEC East. If they win out, and of course Georgia has to lose to Florida, has to lose to Auburn, and of course South Carolina has to beat Georgia. So
I know you got to say that, but I don't think so.
Because those are all facts.
Yeah,
I mean, if, but I mean, the Gamecocks are still in the picture because they still have Georgia left on their schedule too. You know, Commodores have lost 4 straight. They've given up 199 points in the process. They were talking big, or at least some of the players were talking big going into the Bama game. That seems like a very long time ago. Is Vandy's confident shot?
Well, you talk the talk, you got to walk the walk. They got to the meat and potatoes of their schedule: Bama, UGA, UF, Ole Miss, and the 2 home games were, UGA and Bama. When you look at that 4-game stretch, I don't know many teams that'll come out of that 4-game stretch 2-2, 3-1, maybe 1-3. So for them to go 0-4. You just see the difference in the talent level of those programs, and I think Vandy is continuing to build, but you got to understand, Vanderbilt, you are who you are. and making those comments against Alabama set yourselves up to be where you are right now. I think they can win some ball games moving forward, but I do also think the meat and potatoes of that schedule, that was a tough 4-game stretch for any team to come through unscathed.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, it's halftime here on the Dixie Vodka SEC Country Preview Show. I'm Matt Stewart, joined by Forrest Conley, and a number of things we're going to get to here at halftime, including your post in just a moment. Just one other story I want to throw out there that we didn't get to in our opening kickoff, and that was the story involving Jalen Hurts. His odds of winning the Heisman have gone up. He's gone from a 50-1 to a 20-1, and of course that still makes him a big long shot to win this thing. But he's now number 5 in the nation behind Saquon Barkley, Bryce Love, Baker Mayfield, J.T. Barrett, in that order as far as odds to win the Heisman. Would you put him above any of those 4?
I put him at number 3. I think Saquon Barkley is the leader right now, the front runner. He's on one of the top teams in the country, and they're competing for a title. Love, to me, is number 2. He plays on a Stanford team they're 5-2. They don't have a great record. But when you average 10.9 yards a carry, you have to be considered for the Heisman Trophy. That is an amazing number for this kid. And I put Hurts at 3 because they're undefeated and all he does is win. Baker Mayfield, J.T. Barrett, they lost games at home. I am not convinced that they should be guys that we talk about winning the trophy, especially Baker Mayfield. He's put up some phenomenal numbers, but you cannot allow your team to lose at home to Iowa State. For J.T. Barrett, the way that they lost to Ohio State, it looked like they did not compete. So that's why.
They lost to Oklahoma.
Excuse me. Oklahoma. Thank you for. But the way they lost to Oklahoma, they didn't compete. You can't do that at home. You can't play the way that they played at home and get beat sounding like they did. So I have those guys behind Hurts. I have Hurts at number 3, Love at 2, and Saquon Barkley at number 1.
All right, we're awaiting news on James Cook, the 5-star running back out of Miami and the brother of Dalvin Cook. He's supposed to make his announcement at 8 o'clock. I know some of you posted in, somebody posted in that he'd committed to Georgia, but we're waiting to confirm that news, and we'll pass that along to you as soon as we hear a decision on James Cook. Of course, his brother Dalvin was a star at Florida State and now in the National Football League, although hurt. So we will post that to you. We will send that to you in just a moment. Let me get to some of the posts real quick before we start our third quarter here. Jermaine Wells, we were talking about NFL players, and I said save one of the big drawing cards. You put guys in the NFL. Well, he's obviously an LSU fan. He says LSU more NFL players than Bama. Facts, LOL. Well, the LOL is on you, because if LSU's got more players in the NFL than Bama, and I believe what you say, then why haven't you won more national championships than Bama? That's an indictment against your program. If you got more guys in the NFL than Bama, that's not an LOL. That's an LOL on you. It's a laughing stock on you in your program that you haven't won more than you've won.
And there are 2 reasons, young fella. When you look at it, Matt Flynn, Jamarcus Russell, those have been the 2 most successful quarterbacks that have come out the LSU program in recent seasons, and we see their production at the next level is not what you would think from guys that had moderate success at LSU. You may have a lot, or you may have the most players in the NFL, but at the end of the day, until you get a quarterback, until you start winning national championships like Alabama does, you're always going to be number 2.
Yeah, I don't think that's something you want to brag about.
Well, you know,
yeah.
You let the fans be fans, and I understand. And don't get me wrong,
LSU,
they put talent out there. They put it out there.
No, it's great. I mean, but don't
LOL it.
Yeah, don't LOL that you got more NFL players than Bama, because you're not as good as, you haven't been as good as Bama. So what that tells me is you might have better NFL players than Bama. If indeed that's, I haven't run the numbers and I can't do it right now, and I'll look it up. But if you do, then why haven't you won more than Bama? Because that's an indictment against your program.
And you know what, I'll add this too. I think LSU players do a better job in the NFL than Alabama players do. They seem to have more success. The one thing I think Alabama does is they get every last little bit out of those guys while they're in Tuscaloosa. That's why you see a lot of guys get to the NFL and they don't do as well because they've just left everything back in Tuscaloosa. So to your credit, LSU does put a lot of talent in the NFL, but they have to win at LSU. and they need to win more. There's too much talent for them not to be winning, as much as they should be.
Yeah. All right. We got word that Cook he did commit to Georgia, so that makes like 3 consecutive Thursday nights. It's something about Dixie Vodka SEC Country preview for Georgia. They're on a roll on Thursday nights. This is the 3rd consecutive Thursday night. They have got a commitment from a 5-star. It went Justin Fields, and then it went Adam Anderson, and now it goes Cook. This is Georgia's on quite the roll right now, no doubt about it. So congratulations, and of course you're the Florida State alum here. Mm-hmm. It's got to be a little bit of a splinter there for you that Cook doesn't follow his brother to Florida State, instead goes to Georgia.
Well, I like it. I like Cook following his heart. If he goes to Florida State, he has to try and live up to the expectations of the best back to ever play in school history, up to his big brother. And I like the fact he's going where he's comfortable, where he wants to be, where he can build his own identity. Now, the personal side of it, yeah, I'm a little hurt because he's not going to join Florida State. But at the end of the day, as long as he gets where he's comfortable, where he's happy, and he can be successful, and you got to love what Georgia's doing. They're building far beyond Fromm right now. You've got Fromm and Eason already there. Now you've got a commitment from Fields, the top dual threat quarterback coming out. And now you've got a 5-star running back out of Miami. So you beat Miami, you beat Florida, you beat Florida State, you beat Central Florida, you beat South Florida, you beat FIU, you beat FAU for this kid. That lets you know what type of program Kirby Smart is building over there in Athens.
All right, that's the end of halftime, and we'll circle back around and get some of your posts in our 2-minute drill at the end of the show. So keep them coming. We got some other good stuff that we haven't gotten to just yet. But the big news again for Georgia, if you're just now tuning in, they did get James Cook, the 5-star out of Miami. All right, let's get to the third quarter. Of course, it is brought to you by Dixie Vodka, the host of our show. There are 2 things that are not debatable: Dixie Vodka and SEC football. Best in the South, Dixie Vodka, the South's best tasting vodka. Let's get back to the previews. We start our second half of Mississippi State at Texas A&M. This is the 7:15 game on ESPN. Aggies have won 5 of their last 6 games. Their only losses, of course, the UCLA debacle at the start of the season and to Bama. They're riding high. But remember, not quite as high as they were last year when they went into this game, when they were number 4 in the first college football playoff rankings and got beat by the Bulldogs in Starkville, and the Aggies ended up losing 3 of their last 4 games. Are the Aggies ready for the Bulldogs this time around after Mississippi State routed Kentucky last week?
I think they're ready. When you look at this ball club, everything went left last season when they lost that ball game. And these 2 teams are fighting for number 2 in the SEC West right now. It's a foregone conclusion that Alabama will win the SEC West. The only team that can stop them, I think, is Auburn, and I don't think they have enough to stop this Alabama Crimson Tide ball club. I think the only team in the SEC that can challenge them is Georgia. But for these ball clubs, they're competing for number 2 in the SEC West, and I think A&M, they remember what happened, and they'll use that. They weren't ready. They looked past this ball club last season. Yeah. They'll be prepared.
And they paid for it, too, and as a result, that's really kind of the spinoff from what happened at the end of last season and why Kevin Sumlin has been on the hot seat all this season. And then he starts with what happened at UCLA, just made the seat even hotter. Maybe he's cooled it down a little bit by winning 5 of his last 6, but going another slide in November,
yeah, it's a must win.
You'll be leaving the seat. You'll be leaving the hot seat because you'll be gone. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. He has to win this ball game.
But I think they'll be okay here. Nick Fitzgerald ran for 182, 2 scores against them last year. Had a 74-yard touchdown run on the opening drive, kind of set the tempo in that game. He's had 4 100-yard rushing games so far this season. Will the Aggies, though, be able to stop Nick Fitzgerald from running on them this year?
I think they slow him down. I don't think they stop him. He's a hell of a player. He's going to make plays. But for the Aggies, they have to stop the big play. The big 74-yard run last year hurt this ball club. When a quarterback can run that far and score a touchdown, it takes the air out of a defense. So for A&M, stop the big play. Don't let the big play occur. He's going to get yards. He's going to make positive plays because he's a very good quarterback. He has dual threat ability. So if they can stop the big play, I think they'll be fine with Fitzgerald.
The Aggies average 4 sacks per game, which is tied with Clemson for number 1 in the nation. The Bulldogs' offensive line is number 1 in the nation. They've allowed only 3 quarterback sacks, and I think Fitzgerald's mobility and his ability to take off and run have a big thing to do with that stat right there. But who wins this battle? Is it going to be the pass rush for the Aggies or the pass protection for the Bulldogs?
I like the pass rush for the Aggies. They come into this ball game 56 tackles for loss. They lead the SEC in that category. That means they play behind the line of scrimmage. When you average 4 sacks and you average 8 tackles for loss a ball game, that lets you know they're playing behind the line of scrimmage. And a big key to that stat is they have made teams lose 175 yards. So that lets you know they don't allow the quarterback to get going north and south or backs to get going north and south. They're back there and they're on top of these guys when they get the football. And I think that's key, and that's why they'll be effective, because of their ability to play behind the line of scrimmage and keep pressure on the quarterbacks and make those tackles for loss.
You know, Mississippi State has been a much different team at home than on the road. Bad news for the Bulldogs is they're on the road this week. Their last 2 road games, they've been outscored 80-13 at Georgia, at Auburn. Tough opponents. A&M's right there in that group, I think. Maybe not quite Georgia. They're right there, I think, with Auburn, no doubt about it. Do you expect the Bulldogs to struggle at Kyle Field?
102,000 fans. You can't hear yourself breathe. You can barely hear yourself talking. You have to use the force. You have to hold hands with your fellow offensive linemen. You've got to concentrate. I'm sure there have been practices throughout the week with the silent count, with the speakers blaring, but that cannot simulate the natural crowd noise that you will hear. That cannot simulate the game. That cannot simulate the action that the game brings about. So it's going to be a problem. And for any team going into a hostile environment, when you've got 102,000 fans going against you, it's always a problem.
All right, let's move along to Arkansas at Ole Miss. This is the 12 noon Eastern game on SEC Network. That means it's an 11 a.m. start at the Grove there in Oxford. So those people who stay up drinking on Friday night, they might miss the first half of this ball game. I don't know that it might be a good thing to miss the first half of this. It might be good just to miss the whole game. I don't know. Both the big story with this game is injuries, no doubt about it. The big blow, of course, this week was Ole Miss losing quarterback Shea Patterson for the rest of the season. PCL in his right knee. Will the Rebels win another game this season without him?
This team has gone through a lot this season, but they've continued to fight. When you see a system designed around a quarterback with dual threat ability, every game they go in with a chance to win. You can scheme defensively all you want, but when you've got a dual threat, you cannot scheme against the speed of the individual that you're trying to stop. You won't understand and know his speed until you get into the first quarter of the ball game. I think they have the opportunity to win again this season. I don't know if it'll be this weekend, but they've got some games down the road that are very winnable, but it starts here. They have to continue to get better. You can't worry about Shea Patterson not being there. Unfortunately, he got hurt. That's a part of the game, but it's always next man up. So it'll be interesting to see how they respond. And I think when you've got, like I said, a dual threat quarterback, there's a lot of preparation that you have to put in place. But when you don't have as much on him, only 11 passes so far this season for Tiamu. So that'll be a big key. What kind of game plan will they have to try and stop him and slow him down?
Meantime, Arkansas may be without their senior quarterback, Austin Allen. Again, he's missed the last 2 games with a busted shoulder. Brett Bielema says he is practicing, but he's still highly questionable for this game. You throw in the fact that the Hogs lost senior offensive lineman Frank Ragnow and running back Chase Hayden this week. They're done for the season with injuries. Do you expect the Rebels to load the box, try to stop the run, see if the backup quarterback there for the Hogs can beat them?
Absolutely. Anything less will be uncivilized. I'm going to load the box until he proves that he can beat me with his arm. And you still want to run tricks. You want to make sure his pre-snap reads are incorrect. So there'll be a lot of games on the field, but you absolutely have to pack the box. Until you show me you can beat me with your arm, I'm not concerned about you throwing the football and getting vertical.
All right, time now for the fourth quarter. It is brought to you by Dixie Vodka, because you are watching the Dixie Vodka SEC Country Preview Show. Dixie Vodka, the South's best tasting, is available only in the South and made by Southerners for Southerners. Let's circle back around and get back to that Georgia-Florida game. Let's bring in Chip Towers, who covers Georgia for Dog Nation. Chip, you already down there on St. Simons?
Live from Fernandina Beach.
Fernandina Beach, all right.
I am here. I'm deep in the all the way over across the Florida line. So
I tell you what,
live report for you here.
I'm envious. This is boots on the ground kind of reporting right here. We've got Chip Towers in Fernandina Beach, a stone's throw from Jacksonville, getting ready for the big weekend. You know, Chip, I see Georgia fans this time of year, and I see it in their faces. Over the last 3 decades, the Gators have overwhelmed the Bulldogs. They've seen better Bulldogs teams somehow lose in Jacksonville. I think the Dogs fans think the Gators have some kind of an oogity-boogity hex on their team. What do you think?
Well, you know, it's kind of like, Matt, way back in the day when you and I were first getting into this thing, it was just the opposite way.
It was.
You know, it seemed like Georgia won no matter what kind of team Florida brought to Jacksonville. And you know, I think, though, what you touched on there is right. I mean, I think it's us, you know, the media and certainly the fans, you know, the people who have invested, you know, thousands of dollars over the years and come down here and rent all these condominiums, and they stay for 4 days and spend the money and buy the tickets, you know, and then turn around and drive dejectedly back up to Jekyll and St. Simons and Amelia and such. Those are the people. I thought Aaron Davis this week kind of summed it up really nicely. You know, he's talking about we don't really think about it that way. Talking about the players, you know, we just show up and play, and it's like when you flip a coin 21. If it heads 21 times in a row, the next flip doesn't mean it's going to be heads again or tails again. It's a brand new flip, and that's certainly the way the Bulldogs are viewing it. But no, us that have been out here, you're thinking, oh, you know, and I know all my friends that are Georgia fans, and most of my friends are Georgia fans, and they're I don't know what you call it, you know, paranoid, you know, skittish, what you would call it.
All those things, yeah.
Yeah, you know, cautiously optimistic, I think, is where everybody is if you take the whole and kind of consider all that.
Well, Chip, the college football playoff rankings come out next week. If Georgia wins this ball game, they're in the top 4. How is Coach Kirby Smart and his players handling all of the growing expectations?
Yeah, you know, they're ignoring it, you know, or handling it the way Alabama would, whatever you want to call it. It's all about the process. And, you know, the thing, you heard that last year, but, you know, certainly when you're in the middle of going 7-5 in the regular season, it's a little less authentic. You know, there's total buy-in from the player standpoint. They're all sound like miniature robot Kirby's when you're talking about it, and they're, you know, they've got the right attitude. They're putting all their thought and energy into the next game. This is the next one. It happens to be Florida, so they won't have any problem, you know, getting up for it or anything like that. They're the better team. I think you guys have broken it down 9 ways to Wednesdays, just like I have, and you start thinking about how could Florida win this game. It's going to be more difficult than it has been in recent years for them to win it. But that's certainly not beyond the realm of possibility, and Kirby and the Bulldogs are you know, attacking it that way, taking it very, very serious and not overlooking anything, and that's easy to do when you've lost 21 of the last 27.
Yeah, Gators have talked a lot of trash this week. We've had a bunch of strange, I mean, just really like Twilight Zone circumstances coming out of Gainesville this week with the death threats and all that kind of stuff. But the Gators have talked trash when they've had the opportunity. Georgia players have taken the high road, and maybe that's just because Kirby Smart won't let them do anything but do that. Does all the off-field chatter impact the game on the field on Saturday?
Well, you know, I really think it does from the Florida standpoint. I mean, you know, there's a lot of problems over there. I mean, I got a lot of friends who cover the Florida beat, and I've talked to them, and yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on over there, you know, for lack of you know, without getting into a lot of details, which I'm sure you've tackled all that, and you know, it's just a different team right now. They're dealing with a lot of different off the field stuff, and then you know, Georgia. Very, very motivated. You know, you feel like they're kind of on the tracks going downhill. So it's very stark, the contrast that you feel between these two teams right now.
Well, Coach Smart and Coach Chaney have been conservatively smart with the game plan with Fromm. And you've gotten criticism from some of the Gator DBs leading up to the game this week that all he does is throw simple passes. Will we see more from Fromm in this offense in this ball game?
Yeah, I think that's a little bit of a meme that's been created on the Florida side of this equation. I mean, and Kirby certainly didn't believe it to be the case that they've dumbed down anything for Fromm. I mean, I think if you look just as recently as the Missouri game, you know, they were throwing a lot more than slants. They were throwing some deep outs, some flag routes. You know, the hardest there is in football really is that deep, you know, 25, 30-yard flag route, you know, away from the quarterback, and they've rolled him right and rolled him left and had him throw deep down the hash marks. And if you look at Georgia's offense overall, you know, with the motions that they're using, the different personnel groups, the different formations, this is a more sophisticated offense than it was last year with Jacob Eason. Now, I'm not saying that Jake Fromm is, you know, throwing a bunch of, you know, they certainly, I don't think he gets to his second, you know, or third or fourth progression. Certainly, most of the time, there's usually a primary receiver, and he's not going to deviate far from that. But you know, they're doing a lot of stuff in terms of personnel groupings, and I think the most impressive thing about Fromm, I don't have a statistic that necessarily support this, but you know, just watching the team last year and watching the team this year, I mean, he's making a lot more changes, and Kirby corroborated this week. He's making more changes at the line of scrimmage, and most of those are right, left, run, pass, but he's coming up there with checks, and Georgia's using a good bit of different personnel groupings and more motion than they did last year. So I don't think they're necessarily real simplified, even though Chauncey Gardner seems to think so. He may see a little something more than a slant on Saturday.
Yeah, and I think the most impressive stat might be the fact he's only thrown 3 picks. I mean, just don't screw things up. You got a great running attack behind you with Chubb and Michelle and the freshman Swift. And this is not the same Florida defense that we've seen over the last decade that's been graduating players to the NFL every year. Maybe they've graduated all of them out because they're not nearly as good statistically as they have been. They've been top 10. I think they were maybe around the 50 or something in total defense this year last time I checked. Do you expect Georgia to be able to run on these guys?
Well, you know, I mean, therein lies the key to this game. It's been incredible if you look at the last 3 years. You want to look, why did Florida win this game the last 3 years? It's because they outran Georgia 776 to 231 over the last 3 seasons. An amazing stat. Pat Dooley of the Gainesville Sun pointed out to me that Georgia has 8 rushing first downs in the last 3 games. And then the converse of that is Florida has been, you know, kind of running all over the place. And Georgia would certainly appear to be much better equipped both to run the football and stop the run this year. And that has decided this series the last 3 years easily. But, you know, I mean, that's a pillar of football, you know, isn't it? Running and stopping the run. And if you get that going, then other stuff works for you. And I don't think anything's going to be different this Saturday.
Well, Georgia's defense has been the marquee part of this game when you talk about different position groups. They go against a Florida offense with redshirt freshman Felipe Franks ranked number 11th in passing. Do you think the Bulldogs shut down the Gators in this ball game?
There's a chance to. Now, here's what's going to be interesting to me really is kind of the X factor. I mean, look at the situations. Florida's 3-3. You know, they're just trying to get bowl eligible. They're 3-2 in the league. You know, they're effectively out. They'll be, you know, completely, I believe, mathematically be out of it if they lose to Georgia in this game. You know, so, well, they got nothing to lose. And the one thing about Felipe Franks is, you know, he's very mobile and he's got a very live arm. It's just like the 63-yard TD pass he threw to beat Tennessee. And certainly they haven't thrown the ball with great success that way, but he has that capability. He has that skill set, if you will. Missouri, you know, did it twice. 63-yard touchdown pass took the top off the defense. I mean, I think they're going to wing it and be loose and come after. Because of that, though, the converse of that is if Georgia is, you know, fundamentally sound on defense, the difference in these two teams more than anything else is the depth, and that you know, on the lines of scrimmage, particularly on defense, because of the suspensions and everything else. You know, if Georgia, you know, can force them to have to defend a number of downs or to drive the length of a field, I really like Georgia a whole lot better in those situations. And yeah, they've got a chance to really shut these guys down. But the converse of that again is that, you know, the Gators, caution to the wind, throw deep, and that's where Georgia's weakness is.
Before you go, I got to ask you, this is a third straight Thursday night the Bulldogs have landed a 5-star. It was Justin Fields 3 weeks ago. Actually, that came on a Friday morning. He announced on Thursday night he was going to announce. And then last week was Adam Anderson, and within the past hour here, James Cook out of Miami, Dalvin Cook's little brother, has announced that he's going to Georgia. So Bulldogs are on quite the roll right now.
They are on fire, and that is really incredible. And I've been impressed. I got to tell you, Kirby's just got it going on, and I don't know whether that's orchestrated to do this on every Thursday night or what, but they have definitely got it going on right now. That Cook, I didn't think. I knew they were recruiting him hard, and it was get him at all costs type of recruit. But I just didn't think with Zamir White and everything else they got going on that was going to happen, but sure enough, it has. And that's what Kirby. There's so much in this game. You guys were talking about the college football playoff coming out on Tuesday. I think if Georgia can come in here and handle its business. So say the last line I saw was 14 points, 13.5 or something. If Georgia can come in and cover that line and handle the Gators with authority, they have a chance to really be swimming in some deep water this year, and it's only going to get easier for a couple of weeks until they get to that Auburn matchup. Georgia's got a lot to play for, and they've got the team to play for it, and they've got just momentum on every.
You there?
And it's pretty neat to watch. Yeah.
Cut out there for a moment. Oh, last thing, what's your prediction on the game?
Well, I do think Georgia's going to win. I never think that. There's people who read me and hear me all the time. I pretty much consistently all year wrongly have said I don't see Georgia winning by as much as everybody's saying, and then they go out and beat Tennessee 41-0. And I'm a little suspect on that in this game too. The Gators just seem to always keep it close in this game, but I do think Georgia's going to win. I just think they are better in all aspects of the game. So. I would say something close to that number. Maybe 31 to 17, or I don't know if the Gators can score that much.
Yeah.
Maybe a little lower than that.
Yeah,
but
that's
I
the big question.
Winning this one and being able to come out of this 8-0.
Yeah. Hey, Chip, thanks a lot for being with us. Always a pleasure to talk to you, and enjoy Fernandina Beach and the big weekend down there for Georgia Florida weekend in Jacksonville.
Good to talk to you guys.
All right, thank you. Chip Towers covers the Bulldogs for Dog Nation. And time now to get to our 2-minute drill. And the 2-minute drill brought to you by Dixie Vodka. And I'm Matt Stewart. This is Forrest Conley. A few posts right here. Michael Collum posts that all the Dogs now need is Sawyer and Hill. He's talking about Jamari Sawyer, the 5-star tackle out of Pace Academy. Trey Hill, the 4-star guard, but the #1 rated offensive guard in the country out of number two. He's behind Sawyer. Houston County, a block for Zeus and Cook. Wow, what would that be something if the Bulldogs get 2 more, highly ranked offensive linemen to add to this recruiting class?
I wouldn't be surprised if they do. When you got a guy like Cook coming in, you've got Fields coming in. These kids talk. Social media allows them.
It's kind of like LeBron
exactly.
or the Kevin Durant or whatever effect you want to talk. Where they're almost like building a super team with this recruiting class.
And why not? I love it. I like the fact that these young men, and I would like to see all of them redshirt. I want all of them to come in redshirt. That way they get a year of college under their belt. They get a year of practice under their belt. All of them.
Oh, all of them. That ain't happening.
In a perfect world, they could. But, when you got talent like that, you've got to find ways to get them on the field. But I like the fact that these young men are communicating and following their heart. That's what makes a successful player in college. If you follow your heart, you don't go where everybody wants you to go. You go where you feel most comfortable.
All right. And one other thing, Will Peach, I think it was, says, what has Mark Stoops done? We were talking about Mark Stoops earlier, and I think he's made Kentucky respectable. Has he, I think he's done about as good as you can do with Kentucky.
Kentucky's not going to win a national championship.
They're not going to win the SEC championship.
No,
not in football. Now, in basketball, they're going to dribble all over your heads, but they're not going to do it in football. I think Stoops has done a good job. I think he has. For what they have and what their ceiling is. I think he's right there.
Bowl eligibility is what they play for at the University of Kentucky. And They play for the possibility of playing, on a New Year's Eve bowl or a New Year's Day bowl. Probably not the New Year's 4 or 3, but one of those big bowls, and that's what the fan base loves. You've got a team that wasn't playing in bowl games, that was a basketball school. Now you've got a respectable football program. So I like what Coach Stoops is doing there.
All right, and there was one. Oh, here it is. Tommy said Eason ain't going to get the job back. He will leave at the end of the year. I think there's probably some validity on that. Joe, who obviously is an LSU fan, said, that's fine. Come on down to Baton Rouge. We'll take him. And then Tommy replied, no, he'll go to Miami. St. Mark, referring to Coach Mark, recruited him. But I think that'll be a story for the offseason. I think there's a really strong possibility of that happening.
And I don't blame the kid. I don't like the fact that he lost his position to injury, but it happens. And when you're doing what Fromm is doing, you're undefeated, you're ranked very high, you're a potential candidate to play in the college football playoffs, you got to stick with what you've been doing to get this far. So for Eason, it's just a bad luck of the draw. Yeah. But I think he can find a home somewhere else. I wouldn't be surprised if he sticks it out, though. Kirby Smart has done a good job of getting guys there. Let's see if he can keep guys there.
Yeah, I don't think he sticks it out there. I mean, you're talking about a guy that was the #1 rated quarterback in the country or close to it, 5-star. I mean, that guy's got aspirations for the NFL, and rightfully so. He's got NFL potential. At least that's what all the scouts and college coaches have said, and you're not going to be able to live that out, watching from the sideline, which is, it looks like that's what's going to happen there. So I expect there to be something that happens during the offseason with that. All right, let's get to our predictions before we close out the show. We thank everybody who posted here, but we're getting kind of heavy in the show. That's a TV term for running out of time. Let's take a look at our predictions here. Let's see. We both went 4-1 last week, so that leaves you at 20-4 overall, and I'm 19-5. We'll start with Arkansas at Ole Miss. I'm going to go Rebels win this game. Might be the last game they win without Shea Patterson, but I think the Hogs are that bad. I'm going Rebels 27-20.
I think Tiamo gets it done. I'm going Rebels 31-10.
Georgia at Florida. I'm kind of wavering on this pick. Of course, I'm going Georgia, 37-17. What I'm wavering on is the number of points that the Gators score. I don't know that they'll get to 17. They did put 16 on A&M, though, didn't they not? So, yeah, 37-17, maybe too many points for the Gators in this game. And I think Georgia's, given the whole circumstances of everything, if they get a chance, I mean, they could put a historic beat down on Florida, I think. I mean, score in the 50s.
I once again think Georgia is looking beyond this game. They want to win this game. They will win this game.
I don't think there's any chance they're looking beyond this game.
Well, when I say beyond, I mean the bigger picture. So blowing them out, they just want to get the win and move on and be healthy. So I say 31-7. But when I say beyond this game, they're thinking about playing for a conference and a national championship. And this game is just a part of that process.
All right, let's go Vandy at South Carolina. I am going Gamecocks here. I think Will Muschamp has done a tremendous job there at South Carolina. This will be win number 6. And I think they beat them pretty bad. I think it's going to be 43-23. And before you say, well, that's too many points, remember, the Gamecocks put 48 on Arkansas there in Columbia. And I don't think Vandy's any better than Arkansas. Maybe a little bit better defensively. 43-23, I think Carolina wins this one.
5. That's the number. This is going to be the 5th straight loss for Vandy. I think that South Carolina wins this football game 28-17. I think they're just too strong right now. They're trending upward, and they feel like they're a team that nobody is really considering, and they are just going to play the background and do what they need to do, and they win this ball game.
Missouri at UConn. Man, what an awful game, right? I mean, really, just an awful game right in the middle of the SEC schedule. Hey, look, and we both picked Idaho to win.
We apologize. We're sorry. Forgive us.
I'm just sorry that I was wrong. That's the only thing I'm sorry.
Well, we were both awfully wrong.
Yeah, we were. I'm just sorry that I was awfully wrong and I took an L on that thing. And I did. I wanted to pick UConn in this game, but I changed my mind. I'm going to go Tigers 30-27.
I go Missouri 38-14, and once again I apologize.
UConn ain't that bad.
I think 38-14. I think with what they did last week, putting all those points on the board on Idaho. I think this team is fired up, and we get another big offensive output.
All right. Mississippi State at Texas A&M. I'm going to go Aggies on this one. Aggies 31-17 there at Kyle Field. For whatever reason, Mississippi State's just a different team on the road than they are at home.
Yeah, I don't think Fitzgerald will be able to get it done. I think 28-10. I think the Aggies win as well.
All right, in our last game, Tennessee at Kentucky, and I'm looking at the number what was I thinking? There's no way the Vols are going to score 20. My number is 28-27 Kentucky, but they might need 17 quarters to put 27 points on the board. The Vols offense has just been awful, and now they don't have John Kelly. Can I call an audible? I'm calling an audible on my pick since we didn't actually put it up graphically.
But
we're going on the honor system here. I'm going to go 28-7. 28-7. Kentucky wins this game.
I go 33-6. I think it's a Tennessee offensive calamity right now. We don't. You just don't know.
It's just a.
It's just calamity. That's all I can say.
It's
33-6.
It is just an absolute mess. All right. Thanks to everybody who watched for the last hour. Remember, you can always go back and watch it again, or you can erase it if you didn't like it or whatever, or you can tell your friends. We prefer that you do that and drink some Dixie Vodka this weekend because they're our sponsor. Do that while you're watching football this weekend. It'll be a big time, and it's going to be great. A lot of fun, especially that Georgia-Florida game for all the Bulldog fans out there, and maybe the Gators fans. Who knows how history's gone in this thing. All right, that's going to do it. That's Forrest Conley. I'm Matt Stewart. Dixie Vodka, SEC Preview Show. We're here every Thursday night at 7:30 Eastern. Tell all your friends. We'll see you next week.